They say this is a Brexit election, so with Labour setting out its approach today, do we finally have clarity on the difference between the two main parties' versions of Brexit?
So that means we need to focus, not on hypothetical trade deals with other countries, but on strong trading arrangements with the EU.
What we've seen today from Labour is, I think, their seventh Brexit plan. It's yet another nonsensical Jeremy Corbyn plan.
It all seems to come down to the customs union. Labour suggests it wants us in, but it won't say so quite that clearly. We'll ask them to spell it out. And could Labour's Fortress Wales turn blue?
No, I don't mind this, what's her name, Theresa May. Don't mind her, she's...
So she could get your vote?
Yeah, she could do this time. I've always voted Labour, but...
Jeremy Corbyn?
Oh, I don't like him, no.
Also tonight, is Ivanka Trump the most powerful woman here? We asked the Vanity Fair correspondent who's followed her career.
Absolutely. From my reporting, people who are close to Donald Trump say there's only one person in that White House who is not expendable, and it's Ivanka Trump.
And
Happy birthday, dear President!
is South Africa's governing party on the brink of ousting its president?
Well, there were certainly thousands of people out on the streets of Pretoria calling on President Zuma to stand down. But the question is whether people power alone is enough, and it probably isn't. There are processes within the African National Congress that will decide whether or not President Zuma stays in power.
And so say all of us.
Hello. Labour have long been critical of Theresa May's plans for Brexit, but they've not quite spelled out an alternative until today. The shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer gave a speech saying what his pitch to our EU counterparts would be. 5 key differences to note to the approach of Theresa May. 1, tone, more collaborative. 2, there would be a unilateral clarification of the rights of EU citizens to remain here. 3, under Labour, Britain would aim to remain in a number of EU institutions, Erasmus, Euratom, the European Medicines Agency and Europol, among others. And then, numbers 4 and 5, the option, I repeat, option to remain in the single market and the option to remain in the customs union.
Labour's white paper will have a strong emphasis on retaining the benefits of the single market and customs union, vital as they are to protecting our economy. Our paper will make crystal clear that jobs and the economy are Labour's priority throughout.
Now, does what he said really add up to a fundamentally different approach to Theresa May? On the single market, barely, because Labour concedes free movement has to go, so single market membership is unlikely to be on offer. But staying in the customs union is a possibility, one that might solve a pending problem of congestion at the port of Dover and reduce pressure for a border between the north and south in Ireland. Is this a clear, distinct plan, or is there still an element of fudge, though? We'll ask the shadow Brexit minister shortly, but first some political background. Labour's problem is that its supporters are divided on the EU. Chris Cook has been looking at new data from the British election study. It's a huge, reliable survey of public opinion, and he's found hints of what Brexit means for votes.
Labour's problem with losing supporters who backed Brexit has received a lot of attention, but there's a few important bits of arithmetic worth bearing in mind. Let's start, as most of these discussions do, in the north of England. It is true that across the north, most people voted Leave. It's also true that this is a place where Labour is the biggest party, but it doesn't follow that most Labour voters in the north also voted for Leave. In fact, for example, in the northeast, where only 42% of the public at large voted Remain, 61% of 2015 Labour voters did so. Nationally, 2 of every 3 voters who backed Labour in 2015 also backed Remain. That's not to say Labour doesn't have a problem in the north though, particularly with that minority of its supporters who were pro-Brexit. Let's look at voters who backed Ed Miliband in 2015 and then voted Leave. Newly released British election study data from the tail end of last year shows only 46% of this group was still backing the party. 10% plan to vote for the Tories, 11% said they were heading for UKIP, and 26% said they didn't know. Other parties and non-voting took the rest. That is very worrisome for Labour because more recent polling moves have shown UKIP dropping while the Tories rise. Now, here are the constituencies currently held by Labour. Of these, there are 67 where Labour's lead over the Tories is smaller than the UKIP vote share. Not all of them are plausible Tory targets, but a Tory squeeze on those UKIP voters could be gruesome for Labour, and direct transfers from Labour Brexiters to the Tories will make that much, much worse. What then of those voters who backed Ed Miliband and then voted Remain? At the end of last year, Labour was doing better with them, holding on to 64% of those voters. Remember, though, that twice as many of Labour's 2015 supporters backed Remain as Leave. So, while Labour lost a larger share of its Leave voters, overall, it has lost more Labour Remainers. So, it's worth paying attention to them. Especially the 10% of Labour Remainers who, last year, had deserted Labour for the Liberal Democrats. The issue here isn't so much that the Lib Dems will take seats off Labour. This shift would only flip Cambridge. But that movement would be very significant in other races. On its own, it would be enough to move 13 Labour seats to the Tories. Jeremy Corbyn faces a uniquely difficult challenge, holding his party together. But remember, even in the Brexit-backing north, losing Remainers will hurt.
Chris Cook there with some of the sort of political psephology of it all. But with me now is Paul Blomfield. He's the Shadow Minister for Brexit, Deputy to Keir Starmer. A very good evening to you. I'm saying, I think what we got today was clarity that you'd really like us to be in the customs union. Is that, am I over-interpreting your position?
No, I don't think you are. I mean, I think what Keir set out today was a desire to have the best possible economic settlement, and negotiating a good deal within the framework of the customs union is an important part of that.
Crucially, he said, you know, he would put good deal with the EU above hypothetical deals with the US or India or all these other countries, which implies that he would be for customs union membership, because then you don't have the, you don't have any customs border, you don't have any tariffs, and that would be the logic of what he's saying, I think.
Well, it would be, because the EU accounts for about 44% of our exports, so it is important. And it's interesting the way that the Tories have focused on the United States, for example, trumpeting that deal, whereas the new administration in the States has said they're going to talk to the EU first.
Right. So you're willing to forego, if you like, because Liam Fox will tell you that he's got a Department of International Trade, he's scouting around and they're perhaps thinking about trade deals with lots of countries. You will say, look, forget all of that. It's the EU that we want. It's the EU that's most important.
The EU, first and foremost, is most important to our economy.
Why has it taken... Well, why was it not put more clearly? Why did Keir Starmer not just say... He couched it in terms of the option, he linked it with the single market. Why didn't he just say, look, the real substantive difference between Labour and Conservative approaches to this is, Labour, we want to be in the customs union. I tell you, that's going to be good for the car industry, that's what they want. We're going to be in the customs union. Why did he not say that? Is always this sense of fudging it and not quite spelling it out?
Well, I'm sorry that you say that, Evan, because I think we've been fairly clear all along. We've said very differently from the Tories that what comes first is jobs and the economy and people's livelihoods. And at the earlier stages of some of the debates we've had in the House, we've talked about membership of the customs union as an important part of that.
But it did feel like today we got clarity, and yet it felt like, or Keir Starmer gave the impression he was giving us something new today. I think he was giving us something new today, wasn't he?
I think he was pulling together our message in a way which is reaching out more effectively, and as you described it in the opening to the programme.
But, I mean, if he's... Lots of people have not understood it. Little of the write-up is Labour's for the customs union. We're going to be in the customs union if you vote Labour. And yet that is a serious difference to the Conservatives.
Well, it is a serious difference, but also I think we should be focusing on the outputs and not the mechanisms, in a sense. And that's what we've been saying all along, that it's about getting the best possible deal for the economy. Now, you'll say the Tories were saying that too, but we're saying that comes first in the negotiations. And if the way to achieve that is through membership of the Customs Union and proper negotiations around that, as opposed to the cavalier way in which the Tories have just brushed it off the table.
Of course, the issue that you have also today clarified or specified a policy on is free movement will end, correct?
Yes, because...
I'm a tiny bit hesitant, if I may say.
No, because I'm always sorry that so many of these complex issues are seen in very binary terms. The truth is that when we leave the European Union, our whole migration policy will have to be revisited. And that means starting afresh, not only in terms of EU migration, but non-EU migration as well, because if we don't, the economy will crash very quickly.
Right. And so do you have in mind an immigration policy to replace free movement in respect to EU citizens, or is that, if you like, something to worry about a bit later on?
That's something to look at further down the road.
Yeah. Single market, what's the point in saying you'd like, you keep the option of the single market open? You know that's not going to be on offer if you pull back from free movement as you have today.
Well, we want the best possible relationship with the single market because that's so important to our economy. And I think that what distinguishes our position is that not only, as you said earlier on, is it seeking a more collaborative relationship with the European Union, but we're not getting into painting ourselves into corners now by knocking things off the table. And that's what the Tories are doing, and it's a big mistake.
And a quick last one. The European Court of Justice, that's one of Theresa May's red lines. She doesn't want anything that would leave us in that. You're very comfortable with the European Court of Justice in certain respects, having say over the British. I mean, for example, as a member of Euratom, we would be subject to the European Court of Justice, and you're completely comfortable with that.
We would, and that's caused us absolutely no problems in relation to Euratom. But what needs to be understood, and the Tories are being very dishonest with the British people, is there is no international trade deal you can do with any country in the world which does not have a dispute resolution system. And the nature of those systems in every treaty is that they will sit above British courts and the British Parliament. So if you want no trade deals with anybody, you have sovereignty. Right. Otherwise, you cede some sovereignty when you reach international agreements.
Paul Bromfield, thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Well, we're not going to bang on about polls too much in this campaign. We've learned our lessons on that. But the YouGov one putting the Tories 10 points ahead of Labour in Wales, if truly reflecting public opinion, does mark quite a shift in Conservative fortunes. And Theresa May was campaigning in Bridgend and Newport today, obviously believing that Wales is fertile ground. Is she right? David Grossman went to the Labour seat of Wrexham to find out.
The empty shops of Hope Street in Wrexham tell their own story. It is, though, a little more than a decade ago that the Conservative store was bare. Not a single seat in all of Wales. And yet hope now abounds in the hearts of Welsh Conservatives.
Apart from the briefest dalliance with the SDP back in 1981, Wrexham has been solidly Labour all the way back to 1935, and before then was never Conservative. The fact that it's even considered in play now for Theresa May and her party hints at a political earthquake.
This would once have been unthinkable, the idea of the Conservatives defeating the Labour Party in Wales. Labour have been in some long-term decline, but what seems to be happening particularly is that Theresa May's cold, calculated, clinical decision to call an election focused on Brexit is having a particularly strong impact in a nation, Wales, which voted for Brexit.
Within hours of the seismic polling being published, Theresa May was on her way to South Wales. A photo opportunity at a galvanising plant first. Insert your own Iron Lady related headline here.
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Before it was on to a rally in Bridgend to hammer home her message.
Every single vote for me and the local Conservative candidate will be a vote for a stronger Wales, for a stronger United Kingdom, and as I say, will strengthen my hand in those important Brexit negotiations.
And in Wrexham at least, there are voters who will tell you they're willing to consider voting Conservative for the very first time.
I've been Labour, yeah, but I don't know. I don't mind this, what's her name, Theresa May. Don't mind her. She's...
So she could get your vote?
Yeah, she could do this time. I've always voted Labour, but...
Jeremy Corbyn?
Oh, don't like him. Don't like him. No, don't like him.
There's a lot of unemployment in the area. There's an awful lot of empty shops, and I think that hopefully the Conservatives could boost the business up.
To be honest, who do you vote for?
Really, you don't feel there's an obvious choice?
I do have a choice. I've always been for Labour.
But now, how do you feel about Labour?
Well, I'm not very happy with Corbyn.
On Friday, the Labour First Minister of Wales, Carwyn Jones, whose administration was re-elected last year, was introducing Jeremy Corbyn at a rally in Cardiff. Today, he was offering advice.
Look, we never take anything for granted. We had a difficult time last year. We knew we had to work hard and listen to people. Hugely important now that Jeremy and his team produces a manifesto that's going to appeal to the widest number of people and presents a programme for government that says to people, this is what we would do if we were in government. That's what we did last year, and of course it needs to be done again this year.
Some of the new stores that have opened in Wrexham hint at the population change this area's seen. The town voted strongly for Brexit. But at this election, UKIP's once strong vote in Wales could be on the move.
They've actually done very well in Wales in recent years, almost winning the European election there a couple of years ago. They now have 7 elected members of the Welsh Assembly, but a lot of their support now seems to be going to the Conservative Party.
Where now they bowl men once dug coal. The club and the old pithead wheel are all that survives of Gresford Colliery in Wrexham. What also remains here, though, is a sense of party loyalty.
What do you think at the moment of how the Labour Party is going?
Well, they're in the shambles, aren't they? Corbyn won the leadership. I blame the top Labour politicians for not getting behind him wholeheartedly.
They've still got your vote?
Always have my vote, yeah.
Always?
Yeah. Well, my dad was a miner, and things happened years ago against the miners with the Tories, and it's not changed my mind now.
When David Miliband went, that's when I think Labour went down. So that's my...
But it wouldn't be enough to get you to change your vote?
Oh, no. Proper Labour, through and through, so...
Who's winning at the moment?
The opponent.
Oh, dear.
David Grossman in Wrexham, and there will our political editor, Nick Watt, is with me. And Nick, the policy-making process, the writing of the manifesto, you've some news about the Labour process on that.
Yes, I'm hearing the sounds of peace between Labour's warring factions. I'm told that the so-called moderates, senior moderates, those who do not accept Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, are saying that he should largely have his way on the Labour manifesto, and that when Labour holds its Clause 5 meeting to agree the manifesto on the 11th of May, they are saying that they will table just one, it's an important one, but one red line, which is the Labour Party needs to stand by its official commitment, which is to support the renewal of the Trident nuclear deterrent. Beyond that, they are saying that there should be some strong Jeremy Corbyn language on the need for defence diversification. That's redeploying jobs away from the nuclear weapons industry if there are successful disarmament talks. And then here's the big one. They are then saying in every other area, Jeremy Corbyn should be allowed to paint his vision for Britain in primary colours. Now, these moderates would deny this, but this sounds very much to me that they're jolly keen that Jeremy Corbyn should own the Labour result on Friday, the 9th of June.
Right. What about the Conservatives?
Well, they are planning to launch their manifesto in the week beginning the 8th of May. That's the week before the Labour Party will launch its manifesto. Their manifesto is going to be very broad brush, a bit like Margaret Thatcher's manifesto from 1979, though there will be very specific commitments on Brexit, so Theresa May can uphold her mandate there if she gets it. But interestingly, it's the Labour Party that has put into its general election planning grid a rumoured Tory offensive. They believe that in the final phase of the campaign, the Tories under Linton Crosby will launch an aggressive campaign reminding the British people of Jeremy Corbyn's support for Sinn Féin crucially before the Northern Ireland peace process began. Now, it's interesting, some senior Tories are expecting this to happen. Others are saying, why bother?
Nick, thank you. Well, we'll return to domestic politics later in the programme and talk about social care. But first, South Africa is starting to get fed up with President Jacob Zuma. Hundreds of corruption charges could be reinstated against him. The Constitutional Court has censured him for breaking his oath of office. That was over lavish spending of taxpayers' money on his private home. And now another vote of no confidence is coming. He's been accused of many things, but what brought the people out on the streets was the sacking of his well-respected finance minister, a decision which pushed the country's investment grade into junk status. Well, BBC Africa correspondent Alistair Leithhead reports on whether this could actually be the turning point for South Africa and the end of Jacob Zuma.
Happy birthday, dear President. Happy birthday to you.
The African National Congress seems neither in tune with the country or with itself. Those celebrating Jacob Zuma's 75th birthday in Soweto were at least on the same hymn sheet, one of unwavering loyalty despite discordant times in South Africa.
Thank you, Comrade President, for the dignity you have shown in the face of many, many years of being insulted for who you are and what you stand for.
And what President Zuma stands for is what's in question. It's either the poor and unemployed masses or himself and his questionable backers, depending on who you ask. But he's danced it all off before, and he may well dance it all off again, despite what others think. A different birthday message in Pretoria as his political rivals took to the streets, unusually united in opposition.
He has somehow formed a scheme to loot from the country.
We're sick and tired of his corruption as the Democratic Alliance. Yeah, and I don't know about the other protesters, but we're tired of him. He must really fall.
The path to mass protest has been paved by scandal. They're invigorated by the possible reinstatement of more than 780 corruption charges against him. There's anger over lavish taxpayer-funded improvements to his private home. And there's frustration at what's known here as state capture, the undue political influence of the wealthy Indian-born Gupta family. But it was the sacking of the much-respected finance minister that brought these crowds out onto the streets.
I think it was an act of economic and political self-destruction, and it's shown that Zuma is intent on taking hold of the country, taking hold of the treasury, and using it as his private purse.
Well, there were certainly thousands of people out on the streets of Pretoria calling on President Zuma to stand down. But the question is whether people power alone is enough, and it probably isn't. There are processes within the African National Congress that will decide whether or not President Zuma stays in power. They appear to be closing ranks and protecting him. No more so than out in rural KwaZulu-Natal, where you don't hear complaints about the party or any demands for its executive committee to recall the president. This is Zuma heartland. He's from here, built strong patronage networks here, and boy is he popular.
I think he needs to be a president. Those who said he must step down, no.
What about all the corruption scandals, all the way that the value of the currency has dropped since he changed the cabinet?
Everyone do corruption. Everyone.
This area is a big constituency of the ANC, a stronghold of the ANC. To us, he's an innocent man. He's a champion for economic transformation of this country. President Zuma represents the majority of the people of this country who remain in poverty, whom we believe he, as our champion, is going to be able to uplift us from poverty. You could argue corruption all you want, but these people know that this government has given them houses. There are roads, there's water, something that the apartheid government did not do for them. Let's deal with the economy and take it back to the hands of the people. Let's take back the land and give it back to its rightful owners.
Land reform is a genuine concern, but as it was in Zimbabwe, It's also a populist narrative adopted by President Zuma, along with blaming white racism.
It is clear that some of our white compatriots regard black people as being lesser human beings or subhuman.
The reason that Zuma is playing the race card and also talking about land reform and radical economic transformation is because he's under threat.
Jonathan Shapiro is South Africa's most famous cartoonist.
This is a very shocking image, I know. Jacob Zuma is over there.
He recently portrayed the country about to be raped by one of the Gupta brothers, who are resented for the power they wield, encouraged by Jacob Zuma and his cronies.
The fact that I can sit and do this kind of thing and be this critical, even if I've got lawsuits from the president, if he can try and smear me and I can still come through that and do this, I feel much luckier than a lot of people, not only in other parts of Africa, but in other parts of the world.
This cartoon shows former President Kgalema Motlanthe giving a voice from beyond the grave to one of the great anti-apartheid heroes. It's exactly what happened at Hamid Kathrada's funeral. The great and the good were there, but not Jacob Zuma. That was the last request of the man whose letter calling on the president to resign was read out.
You will choose the correct way that is gaining momentum to consider stepping down. Close quote.
Not everyone was cheering, but many were. This was a defining moment as the old guard reflected on the new.
The gracious thing for him to do right now is to be asked to be relieved of his duties. That's my view.
As anti-apartheid hero Walter Sisulu's daughter-in-law, she's one of the ANC struggle stalwarts.
Is Jacob Zuma corrupt, and or has he corrupted the country?
Oh, both. It has increased, it has worsened, whether it's the authority of the government at national level, in the provinces, in local government, it has become endemic.
But the ANC has closed ranks, and it's ready for a fight. Its senior members again backing President Zuma for the sake of keeping the party in step. Jacob Zuma will be replaced as ANC leader in December and as president in 2019, unless another vote of no confidence passes through Parliament next month. He's survived 4 so far. So may say all of them, but the voices of support are wavering. The ANC is losing its share of the vote. The currency and the economy is suffering, as are the very people the ANC fought apartheid to try and help.
All of us. Hip hip. Hip hip. Happy birthday, Mamalala. Happy birthday.
Alistair Leithhead reporting there. Now, Ivanka Trump shared a platform in Berlin today with some of the world's most powerful women, Angela Merkel and Christine Lagarde. It was an empowering women conference, and Ivanka herself is clearly a woman of power. She's assistant to the President of the United States, as well, incidentally, as the daughter. Her husband is also a senior advisor. Inevitably, at the conference today, she had to talk about her father, who's not always seen as an empowerer of women.
I've certainly heard the criticism from the media, and that's been perpetuated, but I know from personal experience, and I think the thousands of women who have worked with and for my father for decades when he was in the private sector are a testament to his belief and solid conviction in the potential of women and their ability to do the job as well as any man. So I think in my personal experience, and you were asking me about my role as daughter and also advisor, as a daughter, I can speak on a very personal level, knowing that he encouraged me and enabled me to thrive.
Well, how significant a figure is Ms. Trump within the administration, and what more can we expect from her? I spoke a little earlier to Vanity Fair journalist Sarah Ellison in New York. She's one of America's best-known Ivanka watchers and has spent the last 2 years researching her empire. I started by asking her what she thought of Ivanka's performance today.
I think Ivanka's extraordinarily poised. She always looks great, and she presents herself in a completely together way that many people find very impressive. So I think that she carried herself very well in terms of the optics of the stage and the people that she was surrounded with.
Do you think she finds it difficult to defend her father? Because obviously wherever she goes, people must say, you know, say things about her dad.
I think she's extraordinarily effective at deflecting criticism of her father and changing the conversation. She did, as she often does, target the media, which she said, I've heard those criticisms from the media about her father. She remained calm. She talked about her own personal experience with her father, which she does frequently, and she did on the campaign trail, and she's continued to do. She talked about how her father was good for the women that he had worked with in the private sector. And she talked about how politics is politics, and politics is sort of, you know, she didn't say this explicitly, but politics is a difficult game, and the rules are sort of different. So I think that she's gotten very hardened to these criticisms of her father, and she's grown quite effective at deflecting them.
Tell us about her role in the White House, because I think a lot of people would like to think, or they conjure up a picture of her politics being totally at odds with her father. Certainly she's flirted with the Democrats in a way in the past, and, you know, do you think she is the tempering influence on him? How's it working in there?
Well, first, her father has also flirted with the Democrats, so his politics aren't as clear as some might think. In some quarters, people in the United States here love the idea of Ivanka getting in his ear because he doesn't have a particularly well-defined political ideology. And so they think of Ivanka, who is identified with many causes that are near and dear to the Democrats' heart, that she will be able to influence him in a certain way. Of course, no one really knows what goes on behind closed doors. What we do know about Ivanka is that she has been expert at speaking out on the issues that she says she cares about, which are women and families, women in the workplace. She has a lot to say on that. She doesn't have anything to say on the border wall with Mexico. She doesn't have anything to say on some of the more explosive issues that her father has brought forward. And so what she's doing, I think, is distancing herself sort of silently in ways that she doesn't want to be embroiled in these particular debates.
What you're describing, though, and the role that perhaps she has in the White House is rather like that we might think of the First Lady having, the wife of the President rather than the daughter of the President. What is the relationship of her to Melania Trump, and what do you think she sees herself, and do you think Donald Trump sees her as basically kind of serving the First Lady role?
Well, none of them would say that. And in fact, Ivanka has been asked that specifically, and she has said, there's only one First Lady, I'm a daughter. You know, she says all those things. Now, in reality, Melania Trump is still living in New York. We've seen reports that she's going to move to Washington, but that hasn't happened yet. Ivanka is certainly more present in Washington and at events with her father than Melania has been. The relationship is one that's very interesting, where Melania is about 13 years older than Ivanka, and Ivanka is about 13 years older than her younger sister Tiffany, her younger half-sister Tiffany. And so she occupies this place in the family where she is certainly the favorite child. Even her brothers admit that. In interviews, they've all talked about that, and she sort of laughs that off, but that is absolutely, from my reporting, people who are close to Donald Trump say there's only one person in that White House who is not expendable, and it's Ivanka Trump. She's really been with him all of her professional life, and so for them, this is a very natural relationship. They work together very well. He trusts her. He does not trust people easily. So what the challenge is now is for her to be able to translate that relationship to an international audience or to a national audience in a way that makes sense for the rest of us.
Sarah Ellison, nice talking to you. Thank you. Thanks.
Nice to talk to you too. Thank you.
Right, time for Views Night now, and in the run-up to the election we're going to do things a little differently. We want to stir the policy pot a little during the campaign, so the views in Views Night will be in the form of specific ideas for the political parties to take or leave. First up is David Cameron's former policy chief, Baroness Camilla Cavendish, on social care.
We need a death tax to fund social care. Few of us want to think about old age, but we must, because the NHS is being crippled by the growing number of elderly people with diseases like dementia. Tens of thousands of hospital beds are now occupied by patients who are well enough to leave, but too frail to go home alone. They need social care, a nursing home or visits from carers. But some families are facing crippling bills of over £100,000, and some care homes are closing because they can't make ends meet. The NHS was built for care and repair, not to help pensioners with dementia get washed and dressed every day. So we must find a creative solution to our care crisis. In Japan, everyone over 40 pays a compulsory levy for their old age care. In the UK, we could cap the cost of social care by raising national insurance. But we'd have to start charging pensioners too. And with Brexit looming, this could become a tax on jobs. Instead, we should charge people after they die by raising inheritance tax. When Labour proposed this in 2009, the Conservatives dubbed it a death tax, a rip-off. But we can't afford decent social care unless we tax either the living or the dead. And it's surely better to tax wealth than income. No one wants to sell their house to pay for care, but in the UK our homes are worth £5.5 trillion. Can you really expect to pass all that on to your kids, but ask someone else to pay for your care? Our elderly deserve a dignified old age, but it will cost.
Camilla Cavendish there. Only last year she was working in Downing Street, and she's clearly come to the view that something needs to be done, even if it's not very instinctively conservative. But would her solution work? I'm joined by Lord Warner, former Labour Health Minister, now an independent peer, and Neil Dixon, the Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation. Lord Warner, do you buy the death tax, the inheritance tax idea?
Well, it's not a bad idea to get some money after death for paying for care, but this just won't deliver the bacon that we need in terms of the funding for social care. 500,000 deaths a year, under 5% of those people paid inheritance tax. So something very dramatic would have to be done, way beyond what Camilla's talking about, to get the kind of...
What's the number we need? I mean, 2 billion's been cut, I think,
well,
in the last few years.
we need 2.5 to 3 billion up to 2020. I mean, just to plug the gap that's been created. If you look at what goes on with demography over up to 2035, I mean, you need 2.5% new money each year, right, all the way for 15 years.
Neil, inheritance tax, death tax of some kind, good idea?
Well, I think you need something to bring the money in, and I almost think that Camilla's piece underestimated what we're now facing. We're talking about, at this moment, 1 in 8 elderly people in England not getting the services that they need, that they're needing to be dealt with. These individuals are suffering at this moment. We've got a healthcare system that's under enormous pressure. So I think there has to be something done in terms of, as Norman says, in terms of the immediate. The longer term issue is we're going to see a doubling of the over 85s. So politicians have got to face up to this. This is a moment to actually reflect on something really serious that has to be dealt with, both in the immediate term and in the longer term.
But you talk to them in your job as chief lobbyist for the NHS and all that. Are they taking it seriously? Because in a way, the next 2 weeks is the best chance we've got, which is when the two parties, the parties that might govern, write their manifestos. Isn't that when it has to happen? Are they putting something in there?
Well, we'll see what they actually do put in. I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister has rather nailed her colours to the mast by saying she is going to deal with social care. Now, that promise has been made before by previous administrations. I am told that she is deadly serious, she is going to do it. But the issue is, it's going to cost money now. Now, to be fair, the government did put more money in the budget, and it's going to cost a lot more money going forward. Now, some of that can be raised by taxing individuals, or it could be done by building up funds or whatever. But over a period of time, we should be starting to link it to the GDP level. We should be putting health and care together, because care tends to lag behind health. Health gets the headline, but then health suffers because care is not properly funded.
Lord Warner, do you like the idea of a hypothecated tax, a tax which is, this tax goes to social care, which is not what our taxes normally do, obviously. They just go into a big pot.
We had a look at this on the Select Committee on the NHS sustainability. It's quite clear that people don't trust politicians anymore, so in terms of taxation. So I think you're going to have to look at a stream of revenue for social care at the very least, which is clearly defined, and that's what they've done in Japan and Germany. They haven't ditched general taxation, but they've topped up general taxation by actually having effectively a hypothecated tax for long-term care. And I think we've got to start thinking in those terms if we want the stream of revenue to be adequate.
What about non-tax solutions to this? I mean, what happened to the kind of the idea of insurance, or whether an insurance that would take you up to a cap and the state would pay over?
Well, the Japanese and German systems are a real fund. They're different from a hypothecated tax in the sense that you just pay a money and government says it's going to that amount. This is a real fund that they're building up over time. That's something we've never done.
But what about private savings? I mean, could you ask me at the age of 40 to start putting money into a savings plan or an insurance savings plan?
That's what the Japanese are doing.
Right. Does it work? Is that what we should
I think it does.
Because people may prefer that if it's got their name on it than to tax of some kind.
I don't think we should just copy the Japanese, but we should learn from other countries. They have started to get people to... They haven't ditched general taxation. They've topped it up. And that's where we've got to try and be a bit more creative. You cannot go on using general taxation, I don't think, because you have to raise it to unacceptable levels.
We need to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. That's actually all we have time for. I will be back in this seat tomorrow. Lots going on in the election campaign there. Boris Johnson giving a speech on foreign policy in the evening. Till tomorrow, good night.